Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome 3 remarkable guests. Laurette Klier, the founder of Nana's Books, Alexis Baker, the founder of Bridgetown Music Therapy, and Dr. Marc Rothman, the founder of the Dementia Spring Foundation and the CEO of Lizzy Care. Welcome. Thank all 3 of you for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. I want to start with you, Laurette. We're longtime friends, but for our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with you, why don't you share a little bit about your background and who you are?
I'm the founder of Nana's Books, which is an adaptive series of art and literature in modified formats so that people that are living with brain changes, they can engage with them as they would and in years past, and it helps to give them that context with which they can access reminiscence and memories, and they can also connect beautifully with family and their communities. So that's essentially the business. I've got a digital component which has just launched, and so there are books that are available on demand, an entire adaptive library, and it's very diverse. Again, arts and literature focused. And then I've of course got the print books. And my background is I'm a career educator, grant writer, mom, caregiver to my mother-in-law who had Lewy body dementia and inspired the series. And I went back and got a number of different types of credentials so that I could learn as much as I could about this work and really imbue the series with as much life and joy and adaptive quality that I possibly could. And I'm just happy to share with you guys today.
Well, we're happy you're here, Laurette. Always good to see you. Next, we'll go to Alexis Baker.
Well, I am the founder of Bridgetown Music Therapy. I've been a board-certified music therapist for the past 10 years. My business and my work was really inspired by my grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. She passed away when I was 16, and I just really saw the impact of music in her life. And for me, it really makes sense to put music and dementia together. And in response to COVID, we created an online music program that's accessible 24/7 for caregivers and care communities. It's essentially a video library for our members to access music-based sessions and for meaningful music engagement.
Thank you, Alexis. And it is a great program. Dr. Marc Rothman.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Lance. Pleasure to be on here with esteemed colleagues, Laurette and Alexis, who both do such tremendous work. I'm Dr. Marc Rothman. I'm a physician, obviously, a specialist in internal medicine, geriatrics, hospice, and palliative medicine, and know quite a lot about delivering care in the home setting. I'm the founder with my wife of the Dementia Spring Foundation. That's a nonprofit 501c3 that tries to bring together artists and innovators who are telling new stories of dementia and trying to change the narrative around dementia and Alzheimer's disease and get us away from that classic tragedy narrative where the only thing you think of when someone says the word Alzheimer's are things like wheelchairs and nursing homes, which no longer represent the lived experience of dementia in the modern day. And we also try to deliver programs like Alexis's to people who are living with dementia and Alzheimer's disease to really bring that joy, that creativity. And we've had the pleasure of spotlighting Laurette's work as well with Nana's Books. I'm currently the CEO of Lizzy Care, which is a tech-enabled services company that delivers a new way of delivering dementia care management for people at home who are caregivers trying to struggle with providing everything that their loved ones need with Alzheimer's and dementia, mostly in the New York City area.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all three of you for being here. I would be remiss if I did not mention that two of our guests and panelists here today have some outstanding hair. Right, Dr. Rothman?
They do. They do.
I want to start with you, though. Is it okay to call you Marc?
Please.
Marc, I want to start with you. First, dealing with families we deal with and encounter on a day-to-day basis, this is often something that is kind of a misconception about dementia/Alzheimer's. Somebody will say, well, my mom doesn't have dementia, she has Alzheimer's. And, we explain to them, you can have dementia and maybe not necessarily have Alzheimer's, but if you have Alzheimer's, you ultimately do have dementia because it's just a form. But one of the questions that always comes up is, how do we minimize or reduce the risk of contracting, obtaining, getting a form of dementia throughout our lifetime? And I don't know, if there's a one magic silver bullet, but what advice would you give viewers and listeners on helping to reduce their risk?
It's a great question. And I get asked that question all the time, as I'm sure you do. And you're right, Alzheimer's and dementia very much overlap. 2/3 of all the cases of dementia in the country are Alzheimer's disease, but there are other causes that you mentioned, some of them a little more common, like strokes, big ones or small ones, some other atypical forms of dementia, and then a whole bunch that are very rare, but we still have to go look. We have to search for those just in case one of those causes could be reversed, a vitamin deficiency, things like that. We would always want to find that reversible cause because Alzheimer's today is not reversible. You can slow it down. New medicines are making that possible every day, which is really exciting, but it is not today able to be reversed. So the question of how do you prevent dementia writ large? Really, the best way to protect your brain is to protect your heart and your vasculature, your arteries and your veins. And how do you do that? We all know the answer. You exercise, you diet, you stay very active, you make sure to do primary prevention, you make sure you don't have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. You try to do that in your 40s. Some people don't do it in their 40s. They wait until their 50s and 60s when they probably already have it. So being active, doing a lot of exercise, checking yourself for high blood pressure, treating it, checking your cells for high cholesterol, treating it, all of that contributes ultimately to the health of the brain. In the example of strokes, it's obvious. Problems with arteries, problem with veins and the heart can cause strokes in the brain. I don't think people need a big biology lesson for that. It is true, though, that the appearance of some of the characteristics of Alzheimer's disease in the brain are linked to cardiovascular health. And it is believed that if you improve your cardiovascular health, you can delay or prevent some of those changes that come with Alzheimer's even. And so it's pretty meaningful if you think about the generations that we're living through today and the changing of the guard a little bit of who's getting dementia as it's moving from sort of the boomers, from the boomers' parents, the World War II generation, down to the boomers, and then eventually down to folks like me. The role of diet and exercise over our lifetimes could meaningfully impact how many people ultimately come down with dementia, and whether or not they endure a long period of dementia or a short. It's a little too early to know, but early signs are that the more fit, the more exercise, and the better the heart health is, ultimately, the less likely it is that you'll have Alzheimer's disease or dementia, which is great news.
And I'd love to get your opinion on this before we follow up with our next question. How much of a role do you believe genetics will ultimately be found to have played in the development of any diseases, but let's just stick with dementia specifically? So you have people who are saying, I got the DNA test in my 30s, my early 40s or whatever. I'm carrying that gene that is shown to be linked to it. So no matter how healthy I live, no matter how much I exercise, I am destined to develop dementia. Do you put a lot of stock in that, a little, or is it too early to tell?
When people ask me about genetics and dementia, I generally like to divide it up into two categories, what I call sort of big G genetics, capital G genetics, and then lowercase g genetics. So big G genetics is that gene, right? The ApoE4 gene or some other genes. That's a capital G genetics. You've got the gene. You have loved ones in your family who may have developed memory loss at an early age. The likelihood is pretty high, right? Because like other diseases that people might be familiar with in life, Huntington's disease and other genetically transmitted diseases, the transmission's pretty linear, right? From parent to child. So the odds are high. I still think that the onset and the timing and the severity of that dementia could be altered by the fact that you stay very physically fit, you have high cardiovascular health, you're taking care of yourself, you're very active. So I definitely think you can influence it, but it is harder to avoid when you have the capital G gene. Lowercase g is all of our genetics, right? All of these things are modified by our genes and our mRNA and our DNA. And ultimately, that's what causes the majority of Alzheimer's disease, whether it's genes that contribute to plaques or genes that contribute to tangles. But there's not one big one, right? There's not one capital G gene. It's just a ton of molecular interactions inside of our bodies and our cells. So ultimately, these things are affected by the genes. But when there's so many acting in concert over a long period of time, you can really modify it.
Yeah.
When there's one capital G gene that you carry that is the big risk factor, it is harder to mitigate against that for sure.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of conversation too on, someone in their 30s or early 40s or whatever age who doesn't show or exhibit any signs or symptoms. Is it a preventative test to get, tested to see if you're carrying those genes, or is it almost to your deficit that you get that test and now you're worrying about it for the next 20, 30 years? It's an interesting question. I think medicine, I don't know if there is a good answer yet. Because I think there are some people, they would get that and then they're going to live like, they only have days to live when they may not ultimately develop the disease.
As a physician, ultimately, I'd say this. First of all, patients, the population, and the people are making decisions for themselves around this. There are tons of people who have a relative with dementia, early onset in particular, not in the 70s and 80s. They don't want the test.
Right.
I know lots of people who say to me, my father, my uncle developed dementia in their 50s, and my sister wants the test, but I am not getting it because the stress and the strain and the anxiety is so overwhelming. So in that sense, a lot of people are making their own decisions as to whether they want it or not. For the general population, there's a lot of advertisements out there promising you the test for dementia. There's lots of articles saying it's right around the corner and we'll see it coming. I think people in general should have a little bit of patience and not rush out to find out. If you give to me the two options of exercising 3 times a week, staying active, staying physically fit, and losing 10 or 20 pounds for the purposes of protecting your heart over the course of your lifetime, or running to the corner and getting the genetic test or the antibody test for dementia, I would tell you to do the former. I would tell you, spend your time, invest your energy in your overall health over a long period of time. Don't run out and get a million tests. In the end, you will often suffer more anxiety than it's worth today.
Absolutely. I want to jump over to Alexis, and I know Alexis has done some work or, contributed to the Dementia Spring Foundation. I want to talk about music, Alexis, because, that is something that we see so many benefits with, people that may have been nonverbal or, can't remember an address or simple things, but then you play, an oldie song of Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra and they remember every single word. I always find that science fascinating. Talk about some of the benefits of music with people living with dementia and why it is they can remember those things from, songs long years ago, but yet can't remember something from, a couple hours ago.
Yeah, it's kind of a puzzling thing at times, but it's almost a miracle in some ways because music affects every area of the brain. And music can activate the feel-good centers of the brain, and it can even help create new neural pathways. And as you mentioned, people who have lost the ability to speak can often still sing. And music is so tightly connected to memories. So music can often trigger many memories over a lifetime, not just so we talk about short-term and long-term memory. It can do both. So in general, we can say music can help support overall quality of life, but what does that mean specifically? So it can help improve mood, decrease agitation, relieve stress. It can help motivate physical movement, as Dr. Rothman was saying, that physical movement's so important. So with music therapy, it's very goal-based. So we're looking at how music can help target certain areas, and music can enrich and engage all areas of a person's well-being. We call it dimensions of wellness or domains of functioning. So the spiritual, the emotional, the social, the cognitive, the physical, all those different areas. So it really depends on what the individual needs are, the preferences for music. But yeah, in general, it really supports overall quality of life, and it can really help change or positively affect the care setting. It can help support the caregivers, the care staff, connect family members, loved ones together, connect care recipient and care staff together, improve communication, just all kinds of things. It's all over, all across the board, the benefits of music.
That's wonderful. And talking about the music, we have Laurette with Nana's books, and music is more of an auditory stimulant and engagement. Nana's books, and Laurette, correct me if I'm wrong, is more of a visual stimulant, but then you've now got the audio book versions for a lot of your books, which can also be auditory as well. And then it engages, we just had a conversation the other day, Laurette, where the care partner and the care recipient, it gives them some commonality to discuss, whether it's a grandparent and a grandchild or a mother and her son or whatever the case may be. Talk about, the benefits of the visual stimulation as well.
Yeah, I think, like Alexis was saying, to be able to stimulate the other areas of the brain that take you beyond, let's say, deficits, that to your areas of strength, and take you from your working memory and your current ability and your current expressive language capacity. And it helps you you are co-attending with a care partner, a friend. You are really, you're seeing things. And again, the way the books are formatted, you've got the text that someone can be sharing with you, or that you can be reading, because many people with dementia read right, all the way into late stages and so forth. You are able to just connect the visual imagery to elements of your past. And in your long term is where you have those seminal moments in life that are really resonant throughout the lifespan, that have to do with bringing home baby and your time in service, or your first love, or the empty nest, or any of those kinds of things. And it really puts you in a place of that emotional and that you're really able to speak with specificity and very, very with clarity to the different times in your life. And that's why nostalgia, I think, is so, there are studies that have proven this. University College London and a number of other places in the UK, they have really dug deep into the benefits of nostalgia. And they found that it helps people cope with the dementia diagnosis, because what they can do is they can sort their memories, and they kind of can, as I say, elide or overlook certain ones at their discretion. They can embellish on certain ones and really recall those, and kind of say, they can be the star of that program and just the star of their own show. And it really gives people back that talking stick, and that they're that revered elder again, and that they are coming from that place of, they are the sage and they are the wise individual, and they can impart that wisdom. And it really does help that dynamic within a family, within a community, that intergenerational spread. It closes those gaps, because those, I use genre art because it has to do with the day-to-day life of, people that, coming home from work and, making a living and raising your family. And what happens is when you see those images, you can dig back and recall those for yourself. And then you are able to communicate in a way that, you find success, and you can reintegrate with your with your friends and family again. And it really does. It's so sustaining. You can, life-giving. You can connect with your faith again through the images of your faith tradition. You can connect with nature again. You can walk the halls of a museum virtually again. You can forest bathe again. So literature and art is so deeply entwined with the human psyche and with human flourishing. I absolutely love this work. It's something I am so grateful for, because when I see people light up the way Alexis does with the music, it absolutely it brings so much joy to all parties, and I believe that it does contribute to quality of life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to real quickly, Laurette, in a perfect world, what would a day look like for someone living with dementia? How would you prioritize it if you were in need of the care?
What I love so much about the Dementia Spring Foundation is when I found them, I just stumbled upon them online. I love the fact that it takes the arts from these discrete, episodic, it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2, we do a craft, or it takes the arts to an immersive place, a fully integrated. So we're talking about film and literature and all the things that you loved, taking in a show, let's say a Broadway show, or go beyond floral arranging to really, examining florals and botanicals, and talking about, etchings and different modalities and different types of art. And I think that the perfect day would have to do with these types of authentic immersion experiences. And a lot of it is at the discretion of, and gives that autonomy to the person themselves. So they can self-select these materials and these types of, let's say it's taking in a film or a documentary, or drumming, or, singing, or, in a chorale with a group of people, and they can chime in as they're able. So the arts have so much potential to revive the mind and the spirit. And that's what I love so much about Dementia Spring, is because they're changing the conversation. And I think people like me, and people like Alexis, and people like you, Lance, that are trying to change the optics and to give people a different vista and a different vantage point. Dementia Spring is giving us that platform. So thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely. Truly, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rothman, that's a good time to come back to you. So how would you summarize or explain how the lived experience of dementia and Alzheimer's has changed over the past 20, 25 years to where we're at in present day?
Well, this is a very exciting moment, I think, for dementia, the community, whether that's the people living with dementia or being diagnosed, who are seeing the potential for treatments, new treatments for the first time in 23 years, I think, the latest authorization of a new medication, the first one in 23 years. And for the caregivers and for the families who are trying to do this work and support their loved ones, they're seeing everything that I think Alexis and Laurette just talked about. And Laurette, you said it so beautifully. I really fully want to sort of endorse everything that both of you were saying, because this is an era where there is nothing to be done anymore. There is a lot to be done. And when you ask about sort of what the perfect day looks like, I sort of prescribe music now for caregiving tasks. The perfect day begins with you trying to, same as everybody else, get out of bed, get on your clothes, have breakfast. Why isn't there music playing during that time? Music that's familiar to you. Why isn't your soundtrack playing? And I love that eventually it's going to transition from Tony Bennett, to the Beatles. That's what's going to happen, right? The Beatles and the Stones are going to be the soundtrack of breakfast time with people who have memory loss, and they're going to engage fully with that. And then they'll do reminiscence, right? And they'll work with looking at through images and books and reading stories, and they'll hear the voices of caregivers around them being creative. So much of what the average day, when I first came into geriatrics, so many people were still really being hidden. They were being hidden away with dementia by their own families often, who had shame, embarrassment, fear. And I knew eventually that would have to change. And it's work like that's being done by these two and by us at Dementia Spring that I think is helping to change that. So, spending part of your day engaging with your loved one through music, through reading, through poetry, through dance, I just think it's a totally different environment. And we're really pushing back against this idea, and you guys both hinted at it a minute ago, this idea that people who have memory loss, who have a diagnosis, a disease, and who often are having trouble speaking to us in the way that we want them to speak to us, right? You ask a question, Lance, I answer your question. That's the expectation. You expect it, the viewers expect it, and I expect to give you the answers that you want. But when that begins to break down in memory loss, I feel like we're biased. We assume that their ability to engage, their ability to cogitate, their ability to experience joy, and even be creative, we think that that is lost because we cannot get the answers we want to the questions we continue to pummel people with all day long. And that is really just a myth, and it is untrue.
Yeah.
Right. Not only have the arts, I think Alexis mentioned this, the arts have been shown, the data is very good. So the arts have been shown to reduce stress and anxiety. The arts have been shown to affect affect, affect behavior, often potentially lead to less medication use in nursing home settings, right? And actually to improve self-efficacy and cognitive performance on a short-term basis, maybe not enduring, but on a short-term basis, the data is really good. So, this idea that all those skills and all those avenues and pathways, and I think Alexis mentioned the pathways of the brain, that all of them are equally lost because we can't get the answers to the questions we want. Do you know this? Can you tell me this? Do you remember that? Is just false. And we need to push back against that. And we need to use those modalities in ways throughout the day to make every day more bearable and better, and really infuse some of those days with joy and creativity and engagement. I think the last thing I'd say is on the caregiver side. Right. We talk a lot about the people who have dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but another group that is actively struggling are their caregivers, right? And I think we as society are realizing that more and more. At Dementia Spring, we're calling this the year of the caregiver, because all you got to do is turn on the television. There's advertisements that feature caregivers, not just for dementia, for people with traumatic brain injury, for wounded warriors, for adult children with developmental diseases, all kinds of, there are more caregivers. Half of the room today is probably a caregiver. And I always ask that question when I'm in front of people, and they're suffering too. And they need the joy and engagement and creativity as much as the people who have the disease do. And when you watch these interactions, and these two will tell you more than me, I prescribe it a lot. I'm not always there to witness it all day long, except with my own loved ones. What you find is that their affect changes. I think both of them hinted at this. Their tone of voice changes for sure. And that's a big thing, because when you have Alzheimer's disease, you are very, very hyper aware of tonality. You hear the critical nature of people's questions. You fear the questions because you have anxiety that you can't answer them, and you will become frustrated. And when the arts get injected, the whole mood changes. The tone of voice changes. To what Laurette was saying, when you sit down and read a book with someone, think about your own children. Your voice changes. The rhythm of your speech changes. The sing-song nature of the words that come out, much less accusatory, much less demanding, much more open-ended, much more joyous. And the same thing with music. And so for the caregivers out there, in using these modalities and these tools will bring joy, relief from suffering, and a sense of real self-efficacy as a caregiver to them, and also not just for the benefit of the person with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I want to harken back to something you said real quick, and that was you've begun prescribing music for your patients. Do you find, I know there's other wonderful physicians out there who have kind of picking up this mantle as well of, endorsing the arts and then trying to do more social care. Do you find that you guys are the exception or the rule right now in the healthcare industry?
I'll be honest, here among friends, I still think we're a minority. A lot of us, I feel like we know each other. And I have found, and my loved ones have found, that often specialists in dementia, people even in dementia, centers of excellence, they know about maybe one program, but there's a litany of opportunity out there and they just don't know it, right? They don't have the list, they don't have the website. And so a lot of us are trying to fill in that gap. There are people out there who get it. And I think over time that's going to change. And people like Laurette and Alexis are going to help change that, right? Getting their name out there. And, I look at the work that Alexis is doing, really make it tech enabled, easy to access through your phone, your laptop, your television eventually. The audiobook I love, right? Making it easy for people to access. So I think ultimately it's going to be more grassroots. I think the caregiving community and the dementia community are going to demand it. I'm a little bit sanguine about all of sort of the doctors figuring it out and pushing it down, but I will continue to prescribe it as much as I can.
So if I could just piggyback on that for a moment, what is the root cause of it though? Where do you trace that kind of mentality back to? And I'll give you my reason for asking that after I hear your answer.
That's a good question. On the negative side, I would say part of it is the prevailing tragedy narrative. When I look back at, and the reason I sort of invested time in Dementia Spring, and partially why I was sort of patient with dementia and Alzheimer's disease in my career, is that I saw what happened with cancer, right? Cancer came out of the closet. Mm-hmm. Cancer was a tragedy narrative in the 70s and early 80s. You told someone you had cancer, you whispered the word, you didn't say it out loud in polite company, and everybody thought, oh, that's awful. Sorry to hear you're going to die. Yeah. And here we are. Right? You say cancer, breast cancer, and people think of pink balloons and marches. HIV and AIDS came out of the closet. Heart disease came out of the closet. And ultimately, I think a lot of the problem is the narrative, which is people are so afraid to say the words. One of the reasons we use the word dementia a lot and not always use Alzheimer's disease is because a lot of people can say dementia about their own selves or their loved ones, but they're really not ready to say the word Alzheimer's disease out loud. And that's because of the shame and the fear and the guilt and a little bit of just wanting to keep it a secret. So I really think the more that changes, and we're not the only ones doing it, but I think the more that narrative changes and people say, wow, you have Alzheimer's disease. Well, how are you going to spend the next 5 or 10 years? Let's do some good stuff. There's a lot out there. As that narrative begins to change and wheelchairs and nursing homes are not the predominant vision when the word is spoken, I think a lot more people would just get on board automatically. I think it'll be more of a, what's the engagement solution for you today, instead of, well, I gave you the diagnosis and I don't really have a lot for you except medicines that are only partially any good. So I think the medicines will help, and I think the narrative being changed will help.
Do you find that doctors who may be unfamiliar or unspecialized in, geriatrics or geriatric psychiatry, that they tend to almost like, cancer, I used to hear my grandmother say the C word, right? They didn't even want to say it. Now they say the D word. It's almost like dementia has replaced cancer, like you were just mentioning. Someone we had on that I have great admiration for, and you may be familiar with him, Dr. Jason Karlawish. Sure. Sure. He was on and we were talking about his book, The Problem of Alzheimer's, how science, culture, and politics turned a rare disease into a crisis and what we can do about it. And it's really, some of it I knew, some of it I didn't, but it's just fascinating to see how it was handled. We went from senility and just putting people in the old folks home, grandma's gone crazy, talking about the passage of the Medicare Act, and how it all was viewed as this is more of a social issue. You can't fix senility. And it just feels like it was all ingrained starting with medical education at the medical school level 60, 70 years ago. And it's kind of time we need to change that perspective and the outlook on it.
Well, I think there are signs that that's happening. And, I guess there's a lot of blame to go around. First of all, Dr. Karlawish, a great hero of mine, tremendous mentor to a lot of us in the field. The truth is that there's a lot of things to say about that. I'll say, briefly, I'll say, look, we had a lot of chronic diseases that we needed to deal with, right? We needed to wrap our arms around congestive heart failure and, COPD and renal insufficiency. And, these are diseases that put people in the hospital a lot, where we spend most of our Medicare dollars. And so a lot of the chronic disease work over the last 10 years, especially since the Affordable Care Act, has really been pushing on those diseases. And Alzheimer's disease is a long disease. It doesn't lead to a ton of hospitalizations. And the truth is that the payment system for Alzheimer's disease is really spread out. So
Right.
unlike congestive heart failure, where Medicare is just paying over and over again for hospitalizations, Alzheimer's disease, if you look at the spend over the lifetime, it's spread out. I'm getting a little wonky here, but it's shared by Medicare when they're hospitalized, and post-acute care for rehab and nursing, Medicaid for nursing homes. Those are two different entities. We think of them as all being part of the same government, but they have different budgets and different entities. The families are shouldering a ton of the cost of dementia. There are some who believe that families are subsidizing Medicare and Medicaid by providing so much free care, not going to work, by the way, many of them. And then it's also spread out among a whole bunch of other entities. So some of it is that crisis is that there wasn't one big price tag by one big organization. And that's led to some delay, I think, and as I said before, it's just that it's our turn now. And there also are less medicines historically, but that's changing too. So when you think about the push on the pharmaceutical side, the push on the social demands for it now that the numbers are so big, the fact that there's so much exciting things happening like among the group that's here today, and a bit of a change of the prevailing winds and the attitude. Oh, and last thing I'll say, by the way, is Medicare just came out with a program, an experimental program to fund centers to take care of not only people with dementia, but their caregivers with respite. It's called the GUIDE model. And the GUIDE model, in my mind, represents finally Medicare saying, we've taken care of these other diseases. We've funded a lot of work on these other diseases. We have to put money and energy into Alzheimer's disease. So the GUIDE model is, again, an exciting step in the right direction.
And just to kind of close out this segment here, I would say, in my opinion, when we look back maybe 10 years, maybe even 5 years from now, this time period we're in with, social media, the apps, the Nana's books, the Bridgetown Music Therapy, the Dementia Spring Foundation, I think this is going to be kind of like the revolutionary tipping point towards getting the recognition and support that these families and these caregivers are so desperately in need of. I really do. Because during, the cancer period, and not to minimize cancer in any stretch, we didn't have all the resources and tools that we have now to connect all these different groups and, have the online presence and the social media advocacy. So hopefully, we're all kind of going to be viewed as pioneers, if you will. Alexis, I want to go back to you real quickly. How would you say that you're making a difference using music to serve these families and their loved ones with dementia? How do you view it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I initially launched our online program in response to COVID because all of my in-person work went away. All of my clients canceled service in those first couple weeks of COVID. So I was just looking for some alternative ways to providing service. And it can still be that for people. I'm still hearing of communities. We have an outbreak there. It's still an ongoing thing. So this is a virtual service. So there's no one coming into a community as an outside vendor. So there is that. And another problem I saw is there aren't enough music therapists to serve within senior care, within dementia care. And I'm a huge advocate for music therapy services. I'm a music therapist myself, but I have shifted my work to a new focus, a new direction, and a new expression of myself as a music therapist. But music therapy services can be very cost prohibitive. So I'm always advocating for it when it's possible, but it's not possible for a lot of people. And that goes back to the financial piece of the care that we were talking about. So our goal and mission is to really focus on accessibility and affordability. And so we try to make it super simple. It's just a website they go to and log in. We say log in, press play, and have fun. So really simmering it down to something simple and accessible, no scheduling involved. It's just an on-demand program, accessible anytime. We have communities that use it, that schedule it into their activity calendars, but then it can also be an activity that's just ready to go.
That's wonderful.
So
Last question, Alexis. And again, we really appreciate seeing you again and learning about what you're doing at Bridgetown. What changes have you seen since, you started Bridgetown and, went to this online format that you've been most excited about?
yeah, well, it's definitely a newer concept, and I think there's a lot of education involved. So we're about 3 years into this, and we're just finally starting to see some good momentum, figuring out our messaging and how to really connect with people in a way that um, gets them to a point of recognizing like, oh, this is a great program and service that could really help.
Mhm.
So it's an exciting point to be where we're really starting to get out there, connecting with people and showing them an alternative type of service and a complementary type of service, a non-pharmacological intervention. So yeah, that's what I would say. And I just wanted to also add in listening to this conversation, there's so much beauty to be found in life after a dementia diagnosis. You look at a person living with dementia and their world starts to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think with the arts and just creative outlets, we can help expand and open their world up again. So
Absolutely.
I'm just very honored to be sitting with Laurette and Dr. Rothman, and love this work. Like Laurette said, just it's totally fueled by passion.
That's evident, Alexis. And the community and the dementia family is fortunate to have the work that you're doing, and just thank you for everything you're doing. I know you're doing incredible work and you're an incredible person. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Laurette, I want to go back to you real quick. You've been doing some work with the Dementia Spring Foundation. What's next for you and Dementia Spring Foundation?
I feel like the sky's the limit, like Alexis. I feel like there's so much room to help these caregivers, with curation and vetted, trusted materials that are just, if they impart that ease and take that caregiver burden away and give people great resources. Now, I was interested that you brought up Jason Karlowich, and I was really inspired by his book as well, The Problem of Alzheimer's. And what it led me to think was that his tagline, and I took it as a challenge, was that now that we have all of this information and we understand the origins and so forth, we need to give people a day that is safe, social, and engaged.
Right.
And because we're in the process of looking for, curative modalities and things like that, how can we do that? So I took that as a challenge. Let's give people the tools with which to do that. Let's give libraries back to people. Let's give books back to people that they can, use. They have that whole kinesthetic. They remember. It's like riding a bike. You remember how to handle a book. You understand, how a book works, and you just love that part of your day where you're able to sit back and to, you've got your magazines, your books, all the different things that you enjoy and that bookend your day. I really feel like what's next is that there are makers and creators and that are on the move, and we're looking to we're digging deep into nostalgia and tradition and just all the different things that make families strong, and that make you feel like you're a part of community, and that that oral tradition, whether it be in song or whether it be in story and poetry. I feel like we're handing these tools back to the people that really need them right now. And again, I've because I've got so much content now, I've been working so much on the content. Just quickly catching up and getting my my online library together, and we've been working with the developer. I'm pretty much done, but going to launch, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. It's been since, I want to say, the end of August. So what's next is that, again, I want to give people a gently priced, very easy option that there's just love in it, and that they are able to bring it into the ER, bring it into a doctor's appointment, bring it into a restaurant, bring it on, for air travel or any wait time, or any time that you can just, have a stolen moment with, with your person, and give them that beautiful little jewel box of their past and things where they can find strength and they can be, they've got those seeds for renewal. That's what I'm looking to do in the next couple of years.
And I know you'll do it. I don't doubt that for a moment, Laurette.
Trying.
Well, thank you again for being here today, Laurette. And Dr. Rothman, I want to close with you and let you explain to our viewers and listeners how Dementia Spring is changing the way we think about dementia.
Happy to, and it's been great being with you and your audience and these fantastic colleagues. What's next for Dementia Spring? I'll just let you know about some things that are coming up. We have our second ever Dementia Arts Festival. Dementia Spring is trying to change this narrative of dementia and Alzheimer's disease as it's experienced. We do that by featuring great artists like Laurette and Alexis, who are bringing creativity to the dementia community. Every week on our website, we now have probably another 10 or 20 lined up for the entire spring. The artists are finally now, after 3 years, I'm empathetic to your journey, Alexis, like after 3.5 years of work in Dementia Spring, the artists are finding us now. Which is really great. I see that kind of flow, and it's coming from all over the globe. So we feature a new artist every week. We give grants every year to artists and creators and innovators who are doing this meaningful work, really trying to find projects that a little infusion of a little bit of funds could really get it over the line the following year. So our Dementia Arts Impact Awards will kick that off again this summer. And we're doing our Dementia Arts Festival on April 11th in New York City this year. 2 programs, a matinee and an evening performance. I have several alumni of the Impact Awards coming to perform. We have stand-up comedians, singers and songwriters, filmmakers. We'll be doing a private screening of last year's recipient. And we actually have Kitty Norton, who produced Wine, Women, and Dementia, coming to give the keynote. So I'm really excited about that. And we're hoping to have some books being read by our friends at All's Authors. And I know Laurette knows them well and is active in that organization.
Marianne's on the board here.
There you go. She's on the board. And then the Bob and Diane Fund, Gina's working with us to potentially get some photographers to bring their stuff to the theater and the center where we're having the meeting. So April 11th, New York City, if you're around, you can check it out online. So, really, we are just trying to make sure that we stitch together all of these disparate voices into a community. So many artists and innovators toil alone. They're out there trying to grapple with memory loss. What does it mean? They had an experience, perhaps their loved ones or their families. They want to give it a voice, and they do it alone. And they don't know that there is an enormous community of artists and creators and innovators like these two who really want to get to know each other. They want to feel that they're working on something in tandem with others and contributing to sort of bigger change. Not everybody works on dementia-related art their entire career, right? They might work on a dementia-related project and then go back to doing whatever it was they were doing next. We want to make sure that that journey down the dementia pathway for them lives. It's not just something they devoted 1.5 years to and then maybe never sees the light of the day. So helping people get into galleries, helping people get opportunities to perform their work, finding other grants and funding opportunities that they can use to finish the work that they might have started. That's sort of how Dementia Spring gets its work done and is trying to bring this community of artists and innovators together.
That's incredible. Well, I want to close with one quick question for each of you, and I'll start with Laurette. The question is, that caregiver who is having what they perceive as the worst day possible, caring for their loved one, they're feeling hopeless, lost, depressed, alone, isolated. What would be the one message each of you would give that one caregiver if you had a chance to speak with them? Laurette, we'll start with you.
Wow. I'm asked this more often than you'd think. I would say to give yourself grace and to really understand that you are, again, this is a phase, and as you said also that we're doing pioneering work here. It's true. People don't know how to access these supports and these new modalities and these new technologies and all that's out there. So it's almost like you're a new mom and you've got, all of these, new roles and new responsibilities and you really don't know how to navigate that. So I would just say to lean into the people that do know, ask for help, but again, give yourself and your person grace whenever possible, because this is a complex journey and there's grief involved, and there are lots of different feelings, and there's joy involved, and there's a lot. It's all 4 seasons in one day, my friends.
Yeah.
So, give yourself grace and give others that grace, and look for great resources.
Thank you. Good advice, Laurette. Alexis?
Well, my message is always music and how music can help. So I like to tell people that music is like a vitamin, and a little bit every day does wonders to nourish the body, mind, and soul. And one other thing I like to encourage caregivers to do is that something is always worth trying. Sometimes we hold back because, and this is more than just trying a music-based activity, but you never know what you'll discover in the caregiving relationship, the caregiving setting that might work for your loved ones. So be open-minded, and something's always worth trying to find a solution for something.
Thanks, Alexis. Dr. Rothman, we'll close with you.
Thanks. I think to all those caregivers who are having that kind of day, I have a few messages. One is, you're an athlete. You're an Olympic athlete. You're a gold medalist in my mind. But there's no Olympic athlete who wins gold who doesn't have a team around them. And you need to find resources to surround yourself with, whether that's virtually or in your community or at your church or across the street or wherever that is. So don't stop reaching out to bring people into your team and get the support you need. And then I always tell people the same thing, which is, you are not alone, and we see you. We really do. We see you, and we know what you're going through, and we want to help you. And I bring that to my work at Lizzy Care, and I bring that to my interactions at Dementia Spring. I just don't want caregivers out there to feel that they're alone for very long. Maybe for the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe this afternoon's not a great afternoon, but you are not alone, and we see you, and we want to help.
All right. Well, thank you. And I want to say thank you to all 3 of you again for joining us today to talk about the incredible work you're doing. And we're big supporters of each of you, and anytime we can help, we're here, and hopefully we'll have you guys back on again in the future.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Laurette Klier, Alexis Baker, and Dr. Marc Rothman for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.